Amongst every singer in the entire history of recorded music, there's one voice that for me stands miles above the rest. As when it comes to sheer beauty, raw emotion, and the entirety of what it means to be an amazing performer, there's simply no one on the same plane as the great Billie Holiday. Born Eleonora Fagan in Philadelphia in 1915, she spent a majority of the first 10 years of her life under the care of people other than her mother, who was busy working all across the country on passenger railroads. After a brief stint in reform school, Holiday actually dropped out of school formally around the age of 11, and after a few very dark years which included prostitution, rape, and even some time in prison, Holiday began singing in nightclubs in Harlem, New York, though she was only about 15 years old at that time. By 1931, she had built a small but solid reputation for herself, and only 2 years later she made her first formal recordings with none other than Benny Goodman. Amongst her early recordings, her version of Riffin' the Scotch actually sold a staggering 5,000 copies, and this led to some small roles in some short films with Duke Ellington. Soon after hearing her voice, John Hammond signed Billie Holiday to Brunswick Records, and this is where a majority of the world first got to hear Billie Holiday's groundbreaking way of working melodies in different ways and completely improvising them at times to properly convey the emotion of the song. Before the end of 1938, Billie Holiday had a number of top 10 hits, and it was around this time that tenor sax legend Lester Young actually gave her her lifelong nickname, Lady Day. It was also around this time that she began singing with Count Basie's band, which eventually led to the legendary January 16th, 1938, which stands as maybe the greatest night in music history. Many know this as the evening that Benny Goodman famously recorded his concert at Carnegie Hall. However, what most people don't realize is that was the same night as one of the greatest band battles in history at the Savoy Ballroom, where Count Basie's orchestra, fronted by Billie Holiday, went up against Chick Webb's orchestra, fronted by a very young Ella Fitzgerald. Only about a month or so after this, Holiday would part ways with Count Basie's band and become one of the first women of color to front an all-white band when she started singing for Artie Shaw, as segregated bands and clubs were still very much the norm at the time. However, 1939 may be the most memorable year in the history of Billie Holiday, as her work during that year remains truly music legend, and it forever changed the course and form of music as we know it. At the time, Holiday was under contract with Columbia Records when she was introduced to a song called Strange Fruit, which was written by a Bronx teacher named Abel Meerpole. Due to the very controversial nature of the song, Columbia really didn't feel comfortable recording it under their label, and they allowed her to do a one-off session for Commodore Records to do this song. The single would become one of her biggest and perhaps her signature song, as she would play it almost every single night at the end of every single one of her live performances, using a lone spotlight during her performance, and at the end of the song, the spotlight would go out, she would leave the stage, and when the lights came back on, she would be gone. Throughout the 1940s, Holiday would record more classics like God Bless the Child and Travelin' Right, but at the same time, drugs began to become a major problem with her, with heroin becoming her primary vice. This eventually led to a narcotics arrest, and after spending a little bit of time in prison, she staged an amazing comeback show at Carnegie Hall in March of 1948. Though she would continue to perform to sold-out crowds all across the country over the next few years, her health rapidly began to deteriorate, but in 1956, with the help of a ghostwriter, she did publish her famous autobiography, Lady Sings the Blues. However, her health quickly worsened, and on July 17, 1959, she passed away due to heart complications. Though she had been one of the biggest stars on the planet for nearly 2 decades due to her drug and alcohol abuse, as well as being tricked out of a majority of her earnings, it's estimated that when Billie Holiday passed away, she had less than $1,000 to her name. Yet the reality is, her passing only added more to her legend, and in the decades since she's passed, her completely unique approach to vocalization has been imitated many times, but never matched in the least. Most critics point to the completely distinctive texture and pain in her voice on every song, though some also point to the fact that she was never formally trained and had a very limited vocal range, and that's why her sound is so unique. Regardless of the reasoning, it's impossible to mistake her sound, and the fact remains that even after nearly a century, there isn't another singer in history that can convey the emotion and sheer beauty of the voice of Billie Holiday.